Why your first $10,000 takes so long. You're sitting there, staring at your bank account, and the number looking back at you is underwhelming. Maybe it's $237. Maybe it's $1,843. Maybe you've even crossed the $3,000 mark and felt like you were finally making progress, only to watch an unexpected car repair or a root canal or just, life, drain it right back down to something that feels impossibly far from where you're trying to go. And here's the thing that nobody really talks about: you're doing everything right. You're working. You're not blowing money on ridiculous things. You're trying to save. You've read the articles, watched the videos, maybe even started a budget. But that first $10,000? It feels like trying to fill a swimming pool with a garden hose while someone keeps pulling the plug at the bottom. Everyone around you seems to be hitting these financial milestones, buying houses, taking vacations, talking casually about their investment portfolios, and you're still stuck in this weird purgatory where you're not broke, exactly, but you're definitely not secure. And the worst part? Nobody warned you it would feel like this. Nobody told you that the first chunk of money is the hardest, the slowest, the most frustrating thing you'll ever try to accumulate. My name is Jack, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, financial psychology, and specifically why that first $10,000 feels like it takes approximately 17 lifetimes while the second $10,000 somehow appears in what feels like a fraction of the time. I've been fascinated by this phenomenon for years, not just in my own life, but in the lives of countless people I've talked to, studied, and helped understand their relationship with money. And what I've discovered is that there are very specific, very real reasons why your first $10,000 takes so long that have nothing to do with your work ethic, your intelligence, or your worthiness. There's this mathematical reality, combined with psychological traps, systemic obstacles, and hidden patterns that conspire to make those early savings goals feel almost impossible. But here's what's interesting. Once you understand why it's happening, once you see the actual mechanics behind the struggle, something shifts. You stop blaming yourself. You stop feeling like you're failing, and you start making different decisions, small ones, mostly, that eventually compound into something that looks a lot like financial security. So if you've ever wondered why your savings account feels like it's moving in slow motion, why everyone else seems to have figured it out except you, or why that $10,000 milestone feels like climbing a mountain in flip-flops, this is for you. Because once you see what's really going on, the whole game changes. The math nobody explains. Let's start with something that sounds almost insultingly simple but is actually the foundation of why this feels so hard. Percentages don't work the same way at different scales. I know. You're thinking, Jack, I know how percentages work. But hear me out, because this is where it gets interesting. If you save $100 when you have $1,000, you've increased your savings by 10%. That's significant. That's visible. That feels like progress. But if you save $100 when you have $100,000, you've increased your savings by 0.1%. It's literally the same effort, the same sacrifice, the same $100. But the psychological impact is completely different. And this is the cruel irony of building wealth from nothing. Your early efforts don't feel rewarding because the percentage gains, even when they're massive, are still tiny in absolute terms. You save $500 and you feel like you should be celebrating because that's 50% of your current savings. But your brain looks at the total and goes, cool, you have $1,500. Still can't afford a medical emergency. I remember hitting $2,000 in savings for the first time in my 20s and feeling simultaneously proud and defeated, because $2,000 sounds like a decent amount of money until you realize it's not even 2 months of rent. It's not enough for a decent used car. It won't cover a significant life event. It's basically enough to give you a false sense of security before reality reminds you that you're still one surprise expense away from zero. This is why millionaires can casually add $10,000 to their net worth in a month through passive investments and barely notice, while you're scraping together that same amount over 2 years through active sacrifice. They're working with different math. A 5% return on $200,000 is $10,000. A 5% return on $2,000 is $100. Same percentage, completely different realities. And here's what makes this even more frustrating. You're probably earning that first $10,000 through pure labor, trading hours for dollars, every single dollar requiring your active effort. Meanwhile, once you have significant capital, money starts earning money for you. But you can't get to that point until you somehow cross this brutal initial threshold where every dollar requires maximum effort for minimum psychological reward. The math is quite literally working against you at the beginning. It's not fair, it's not designed to be encouraging, and it's not your fault that it feels impossibly slow. Because it is slow. The math makes it slow. Anyone who tells you otherwise either had help you don't know about or has forgotten what it was actually like. The expenses you can't avoid. Now let's talk about something even more frustrating. Baseline existence is expensive, and nobody warns you just how much of your income evaporates before you even get a chance to think about saving. You probably already know this intellectually, but let me paint the picture because I think we don't talk about it enough. Your income comes in, let's say you're making $45,000 a year, which is pretty close to the median in many places. That sounds reasonable, right? That's $3,750 a month. Except, it's not. First, taxes take their cut. Federal income tax, state income tax if you're somewhere that has it, Social Security, Medicare. Suddenly you're looking at maybe $2,900 actually hitting your account. Okay, fine. Still workable. Rent or mortgage. In most cities, that's eating $1,200 to $1,800 of that right away. Let's say $1,400 because you're being responsible and not spending more than you can afford. You're down to $1,500. Car payment, insurance, and gas? Even if you bought used and are being careful, that's probably another $400 to $600 depending on where you live and what insurance costs in your area. Let's say $500. Now you're at $1,000 left. Groceries? If you're cooking at home and being reasonable, that's still $250 to $350 a month for one person, more if you have a family. Let's call it $300, down to $700. Utilities, phone, internet? That's another $200 easy, probably more if you're paying for electricity, water, trash, phone, and internet separately. So $500 left. Student loans? Health insurance? Credit card minimum payments from when you were younger and didn't know better? Renter's insurance? That could easily be another $300 to $400. Let's say $350. And we're at $150 left. $150 per month for literally everything else. Toiletries. Household supplies. Clothing when your shoes wear out. Any social life whatsoever. Any emergency, any surprise, any moment of being human and wanting to enjoy your existence. You see the problem? You're not being frivolous. You're not being irresponsible. You're literally just existing, and there's almost nothing left. And this is assuming nothing goes wrong. This is assuming your car doesn't break down, you don't get sick, your laptop doesn't die, your phone doesn't crack, your cat doesn't need emergency vet care. This is why that first $10,000 takes so long. Because you're trying to save out of margins that barely exist. You're trying to extract savings from an equation that's already balanced at zero. Every financial advisor will tell you to pay yourself first, to save before you spend, to treat savings like a bill you can't skip. And that's great advice for someone who has room in their budget for bills they can't skip. But when you're operating at baseline, when there's no fat to cut, you're basically being asked to violate the laws of mathematics. And the insidious thing is that this makes you feel like you're failing at something that should be simple. Like if you were just more disciplined, more careful, more committed, you'd find the money. But the truth is that at certain income levels with certain cost structures, there simply isn't much money to find. The system isn't designed for you to accumulate capital at that level. It's designed for you to survive and consume, month after month, with just enough left over to feel like you're not drowning but not enough to actually get ahead. The emergencies that reset everything. Let's talk about the thing that's probably happened to you at least 3 times while you've been trying to save. You finally get a little momentum going. You've managed to save $1,200. You're feeling good. You're feeling like maybe, just maybe, this is the time you actually do it. And then your car makes a sound. Not just any sound, that sound. The one that means expensive. Or you go to the dentist for a routine cleaning and they find a cavity that needs a crown. Or your laptop, which you need for work, starts doing that thing where it freezes every 15 minutes and you just know, that it's not going to last another month. And just like that, your $1,200 becomes $300. Or $50. Or $0, plus $400 in credit card debt because the actual expense was $1,600 and you had to put the difference somewhere. This is what I call the reset cycle, and it's probably the single biggest reason your first $10,000 takes so long. It's not that you can't save. It's that you can't save consistently because life keeps hitting you with expenses that are too big to cash flow but not big enough to justify, giving up and declaring bankruptcy or something dramatic. Your water heater breaks. Your tooth cracks. Your phone falls in the toilet. Your dog eats something he shouldn't and needs emergency surgery. Your work requires you to travel and then take 6 weeks to reimburse you. Your roommate moves out and you have to cover the full rent for 2 months until you find a replacement. Your car registration is due and also you failed emission, so now you need a catalytic converter. And here's the cruel part, these aren't luxuries. These aren't failures of discipline. These are just requirements of existence. Your teeth need to be fixed or they'll get worse. Your car needs to run or you can't get to work. You need a phone in 2026 to function in society. But when you're trying to save your first $10,000, these inevitable expenses feel like personal failures. Every reset feels like you're back at square one, like you're never going to get there, like the universe is specifically conspiring against your financial goals. I went through a period where I got hit with 3 major unexpected expenses in 4 months. First, my car needed new brakes, $600. Then my laptop died completely, $800 for a refurbished one. Then I got hit with a surprise tax bill because I'd accidentally underwithheld as a freelancer, $100. I watched my savings account go from $3,400 to $900 in the span of a season. And I remember sitting there thinking, what is even the point? Why am I trying to save when the world clearly has other plans for my money? But here's what I didn't understand at the time, this is the phase where you're building your emergency fund. This is what it's for. This is the point. You're supposed to get hit with emergencies while you're building your emergency fund. That's why you're building it. The problem is that it doesn't feel like progress when every time you save $2,000, a $1,500 emergency appears and erases it. What eventually changes, and this is important, is that you get to a point where your emergency fund is larger than most emergencies. Where a $1,200 car repair is annoying but doesn't wipe you out. Where you can handle a $800 expense and still have $6,000 left. That's when saving starts to feel possible. That's when the reset cycle loses its power. But getting there? Getting to that point where your savings can absorb normal life without evaporating? That's the hardest part. That's why your first $10,000 takes so long. Because you're not just saving the money. You're saving the money while also covering every small to medium crisis that arises along the way, and those crises don't stop just because you're trying to build wealth, the invisible debt anchor. Here's something nobody really prepares you for, debt isn't just expensive because of the principal amount you owe. It's expensive because of the opportunity cost, the psychological weight, and the way it fundamentally changes your relationship with money. Let's say you have $15,000 in student loans at 5% interest. That's probably costing you around $80 to $100 a month just in interest before you even touch the principal. Over a year, that's $1,000 to $1,200 that just disappears. It doesn't buy you anything. It doesn't build anything. It's just gone, payment for the privilege of having borrowed money in the past. Or maybe you've got $3,500 in credit card debt at 18% interest. If you're making minimum payments, you're probably paying $120 a month, and maybe $50 of that is actually reducing the debt while $70 is just interest. That's $840 a year going to the credit card company for absolutely nothing. Add those together and you're looking at $2,000 a year that's flowing out of your life in interest payments alone. That's $2,000 that could have been your first $10,000. That's 2 whole months of your savings goal, just gone, before you even start trying to save. But it's not just the math that makes debt an anchor. It's the psychology. When you have debt hanging over you, saving feels almost irresponsible. Logically, you know you're supposed to pay off high-interest debt before you start investing in index funds. That makes mathematical sense. But it creates this weird situation where you can be making financial progress, paying down debt, without ever seeing your savings account grow. I had a friend who spent 2.5 years aggressively paying off a car loan and 2 credit cards. She was making huge financial strides, was doing everything right, but her savings account stayed basically flat that entire time at around $1,500 because every extra dollar went to debt. And she kept feeling like she was failing at adulting because she'd see other people posting about their savings milestones while her net worth barely budged. The truth is her net worth was increasing. Debt going down is mathematically identical to savings going up, but psychologically, it didn't feel like progress. It felt like treading water. It felt like all her effort was disappearing into an invisible hole instead of building toward something. This is the debt trap that nobody warns you about when you're 19 and signing student loan paperwork, or 22 and getting your first credit card. They tell you about the interest rates, sure, but nobody explains that this debt will sit on your financial life like a weighted blanket for years, making it almost impossible to save that first chunk of money because every dollar you earn is already spoken for before it even hits your account. And here's the really frustrating part: the system is kind of designed this way. The credit card companies, the student loan servicers, they are not rooting for you to pay off your debt quickly and start building wealth. They make money when you carry balances. They make money when it takes you years to pay things off. They've mathematically optimized their minimum payments to keep you in debt as long as possible while technically making progress. So when you're trying to save your first $10,000 and you've got debt, you're essentially trying to fill a bucket that has a hole in the bottom. The hole is small enough that you can make progress, but it's big enough that everything takes twice as long as it should. And that's assuming you're not taking on new debt along the way. The income problem nobody admits. Let's talk about the thing that's probably running through your head right now. Okay, Jack, but what if the problem is just that I don't make enough money? And honestly? Yeah. That might be part of it. In fact, that's probably a big part of it. But nobody wants to say it directly because it sounds like making excuses or complaining or admitting defeat. But here's the reality: there are income levels at which saving $10,000 is genuinely difficult, not because of personal failing but because of mathematics. If you're making $30,000 a year, living in a place where rent is $1,000 a month, and you have a car payment and student loans and, you'd like to occasionally eat food, the math just doesn't math. You can optimize all you want. You can meal prep and cut out subscriptions and never go out and never buy new clothes and live the most austere, disciplined lifestyle imaginable, and you still might only squeeze out an extra $200 a month in savings. Which is great. $200 a month is fantastic. But that means your $10,000 takes over 4 years, assuming nothing goes wrong. Which, as we've established, things will absolutely go wrong. The dirty secret of personal finance is that most of the advice is written by and for people who have already crossed a certain income threshold. The advice assumes you have enough income that the problem is allocation, not total amount. It assumes that if you just budget better, meal prep more consistently, and cut unnecessary expenses, you'll find plenty of room to save.